There are a handful of ways that you can stand out in your job interview. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through one of the easiest ones because it is fully in your control: using data. If you've ever watched any of my mock interview videos, you know that one of the common complaints that I have over and over again is that candidates fail to use metrics or data in their answer. Failing to use data in your answer detracts from the quality of your answer. You have the opportunity to expand on whatever it is you're talking about. And metrics and data oftentimes are one of the easiest ways to do that. And yet candidates fail to do this again and again. When an interviewer presents you with a question in your job interview, they are interested in what you did, how you did it, and the results of what you did. Let me repeat that. What, how, results. While the results section is the obvious starting point for where you can insert data to make your story better, there are other parts of your answer that you're going to give in your interview where you can meaningfully improve your answer with data. I have an entire playlist on this channel dedicated to walking you through my model for how I was answering questions when I was going for the big jobs after I left Amazon. And it was a liberal adaptation of an internal Amazon process for how they do and run their meetings. It's the FAQ process. And applying this FAQ process to the STAR format is one of the easiest ways to make your answers much better. And so with that in mind, I'm going to walk you through some questions, some FAQ type questions that you could be answering in the context of your answers, your stories, where you can insert data and make your answers better. So here's one example. Why did this problem need to be solved now? Answering this question demonstrates that you as a candidate have good judgment. You have the ability to, talk about a metric that was being monitored, right? Or something, some metric was out of threshold, out of band for what you considered normal operations. Maybe there was a certain threshold that the customer complaints had risen above for a specific feature that caused you and your team to have to act at that moment. Whatever the data happens to be, this is your opportunity to show that you as a candidate are using metrics and data to prioritize decisions that you're making in your everyday operations. Another common question I get, specifically in the follow-up sessions, but I also get them in emails and comments even on these videos as an example, is how much data is too much? You obviously don't want to just run off at the mouth with a bunch of metrics for the sake of, talking about metrics. In general, one or two metrics will tightly relate to whatever it is you're talking about. Every piece of data that you include should serve a purpose or make a point that you're trying to make within the context of your answer. If you're going to talk about the performance of a system, focus on one metric, writes per second, reads per second, what I'm just making those up. But the point is to select one or two that are meaningful and appropriate, as opposed to, well, we had this wall of numbers that we looked at every day and this is what we process. The reality is that's not true, right? Most businesses actually boil down to one core number. Right? You can have all the metrics in the world, but you probably have one core number that you're monitoring on a daily basis that helps you understand the health of your business. So this extrapolates out and is true for all things that require data, right? You can have all the metrics in the world, but at the end of the day, there's usually one or two that are super important that you look at and kind of give you a sense of the health. So instead of focusing on just reading off a laundry list of daily, monthly, quarterly active users and some percentages, right? If you go through this wall of numbers, it's very possible that the interviewer is going to tune out. They're going to lose the thread. And not only are you failing to demonstrate that you know how to communicate what's important, but when they tune out, they lose the thread on the interview. And now you run the risk of them getting up, walking out of the room and having nothing positive to say about you because they literally weren't listening because you over-communicated, right? You gave too many numbers, too many things for them to focus on. You didn't communicate, these are the important things. They don't know what's important, so they just give up. So let's use two very specific examples to kind of juxtapose how this could look, right? If you say, we spent $1 million in a fiscal year, and in the previous quarter, we spent the majority of it, which is roughly $500K. In doing this, we took our daily average signups to 10,000 average, and the users had a lifetime value of $10. Okay? It's got a lot of metrics, talks about a variety of things within the context of the company growth and the metrics growth, but fine, that is an answer, right? Now let's compare this against. We spent 20% more on our acquisition costs in the quarter to generate 45% more users. And as a cohort, they were more active and overperformed the baseline of daily active users by 15%. Do you see the difference there? The difference between the two is The first one had just a wall of numbers that really didn't have any kind of comparative, right? It's chock full of data, but none of it really neatly ties together in a way that I, as an interviewer, can really understand what happened, right? The use of percentage numbers changes, at the very least, gives me, the interviewer, enough data to answer the question for myself, from what to what, right? If you just throw a wall of numbers, oh, we increased spend to $1 million and daily active users went to 10,000. I don't, is that good? What was the targets? How did you know you were succeeding, right? There's all of these FAQ type questions that will follow on from that, me as the interviewer, that I'm going to want to ask, that you as a candidate are creating. You're creating problems by not answering those questions, by just spewing off at numbers and not really thinking, like, what do these numbers really communicate, right? So back to that number with the answer with the wall of numbers. We increased our spend from $1 million. From what? Okay. And in the quarter, we spent roughly half of it, over 500,000. Was that normal? Right? Year over year, was your spend supposed to be 50% of your marketing spend, or whatever this $1 million? I don't know, right? But you're not communicating that to me as the interviewer. And in doing this, we took our daily average users up to 10,000. Okay, from what? 9,500? Doesn't sound that great. 2,000? Hey, that could be interesting, right? But I don't really understand this. What were the customer acquisition costs? I need to understand this, but there's too much here. And then finally, we had a higher lifetime value of $10. Okay. From what to what? I don't, as the interviewer, I'm listening to these numbers. I'm like, okay, I don't know if this is good, right? That's the problem, is I don't know if this is good. And that's on you to make that clear to me. Finally, there's a question I get all the time from candidates, and they want to know, well, what do I do when I want to share metrics, but I'm afraid those metrics, data, whatever, is proprietary or private information? And it's a great question, but here's the reality of it. Well, two parts. One, don't do it, right? If there's any question in your mind, don't do it. Let's just start there. Don't. That's an easy thing to do. But the second answer is, are they really private, or do you just think they're private, right? Because at the end of the day, look, if you don't want to say we increased revenue to $2.5 million, fine, sure, that's giving away information about your company and how it's performing, et cetera, right? But what you can say is we increased our revenue by 25%. That's a pretty good number, right? Even better would be to say we increased our revenue by 25% over our baseline target of 6%, right? Because you're answering that from what to what, that's helpful, and you're using percentages and giving me a range of kind of expectation of what you thought versus what you did. Those are all good, and at no point do I know that you got it to $2.5 million. And that's the thing here. So a lot of people get lost in this, like, I don't want to give away data, I don't want to talk about my company. Just like, if you honestly believe the person sitting in the room, unless you're in a directly competitive company, the person in the room is just going to forget anything you say to them the second they walk out of them. That's just true. The important thing is, when you use percentages or you use ranges, you're demonstrating that you have a mastery of the data, you have a command of the data, while at the same time you're hiding the details, right? You're hiding the details in a way that says, look, I know what I need to know, and this is how we operate. We operate within a framework that's guided by metrics and data. Hey, that's all great and good. I don't want to reveal too much to you, but here's what I can reveal in a way that demonstrates that we overperformed and we're awesome and we're great. But just giving you the numbers, you would have no real ability to act on that. I know I said finally, but this is the bonus section, which is, look, one final thing on data. Never use hyperbole, right? Avoid statements like we dramatically increased, or we had massive growth, or this was a hugely important. All of those extra adjectives don't really add the value that you think they do. And in fact, it kind of obfuscates the information that you're really trying to communicate, which is we increase sales, right? Let the data speak for itself. And here's the second bonus part, which is, look, if you truly believe that there's no data for your story that would in any way add value, it's totally fine. Look, if you're talking about improving some process and you are a front of house worker at a hotel, as an example, you may not have had access to the metrics or data related to some process that you improved, right? Increased cycle times for getting customers through the desks or whatever, right? But what you can do with the benefit of hindsight and sitting in an interview and presenting yourself of someone who's metrics driven is you can talk about metrics that you would have expected to change as a result of whatever it is you did, or things that you could have measured to demonstrate the efficiency of those changes, right? Because at that moment you're sitting in the room, you have the benefit of hindsight. And if you've applied any critical thinking to the stories and you've kind of written them out, you follow the FAQ format that I've outlined in that playlist I referred to earlier, like if you've prepared your stories, you can critically ask yourself, like, how would you have known you were being successful? And if the answer is, look, at the time I was a front of house desk worker, guy at the front desk. I didn't have access to that metrics. That was the manager's job. Don't state it in a way which is learned helplessness, which is I didn't have it and I couldn't have it. No, just I didn't have it. But as someone who's more senior now, looking back on that, here's what I would have looked at, or way better, way better, but this kind of requires going back in time, is, I often talk to my manager about that. And what he told me was these are the metrics that they were looking at, right? You may not be in control of the metrics, but if you show that natural inquisitiveness earlier, maybe you have access to the metrics, that's great. Or an inquisitiveness now, which is you're looking back on hindsight being 2020, you have the ability to say, hey, here's what I did.